You see floating market. You see people who live on the river. Sometimes people who live on the boat for 3-4 generations, and then that's their life. And at one point, I dream. I say it's so damn romantic. If I will have my girlfriend with me floating down the river, it's important for the Vietnamese frame of mind that you have to live with water. And since you interact with water, you live on water, by the water, and sometimes you fish underwater. That particular culture is for the current situation. So what we're going to do about that, we just let the future generation to come up with the idea, with the solution.
Yeah.
That's irresponsible. I've heard people who told me this kind of idea, and it's make me somewhat angry because.
What would happen if this continues in another 50 years?
Oh, well, there might not be a delta anymore.
Hello, guys. Welcome back to another episode of Vietnam Rising podcast. It's Minh Tam, and today is a very special episode because it's something that it's a topic that I'm eagerly learning, especially from an expert that who could tell us more about this urgent matter. Right now in Vietnam, we are experiencing a lot of climate change issues like flooding, storms, and drought, like all across the countries. And just within this past month, there has been so many incidents happen that it really makes me really questions about why does it get to here, like why is the situation so bad right now, and how can we learn, and how do we evolve from it, or how do we conquer, resolve this issue. So today I invited Professor Chung, and he is an expert of Mekong Delta, and I will let you introduce specifically what are we going to talk today?
First, good morning. Currently, I am a researcher for the National University of Ho Chi Minh City, located on number 12 Dinh Tiên Hoàng, and I'm on a part-time basis. I do as volunteer. I used to teach in the U.S. for some 35 years, and about 5 years ago, I decided that I would be freer, doing my river work instead of, going to classroom every day and drinking my cappuccino, after class. So I decided to leave the classroom and take my retirement. Then landed in Ho Chi Minh City since 2015. I have made the city my permanent, residence or address right now. I love the city food. I love the folks. A good opportunity for me today and to be with you the next hour or so and discussing some issues pertaining to water, pertaining to food security, for example, pertaining to the effect of man-made structure on the river, and maybe sharing with you some perspective of the future.
Yes, and we also going to discuss about how sustainability is like a new word that we are learning to evolve and how to apply into our own life as well. And from today's sessions, we're going to learn about how do we, like as common people, could actually participate and contribute in resolve these climate changing issues that we like in Vietnam or anywhere else in the world is facing. So see you in the episode. You went to Mekong yesterday, right?
So yes, I'm away. I feel two kind of two kinds of thinking. One that is I feel safer because of the pandemic. It was really well controlled here, and I think kudos and appreciation of the Vietnamese government have a handle into this health issue. The second thing is I am connecting back into childhood in many ways because I was never, have a long kind of experience with Vietnam since I left when I was, in my teenage years. And so now reconnecting means a lot to me. Reconnecting means the re-exploring, for example, of, what's I miss. And then there was a gap. It's a huge gap of something like...
You were 50 years.
I was, for 50 years living in the U.S., right? And then, of course, since 1990, 30 years ago, I was able to return and then continuously working with the Vietnamese side on many issues, from urban issue to educational, and then now is the issues of environmental, issues of rivers, issue of the water, issue of a part of Vietnam that when I was born, I don't even know, what was the Mekong Delta, right? And growing up in the city, not too far from here, I live in Dachau, and then, and hearing the kind of information from the countryside, be it from Cái Bè, be it from Cổ Cò, be it from, Cái Lầy. I have no idea. I just, see my relatives, bringing
food.
This food up and then carry a couple of ducks, and then for my Dam Yo, for my, the death anniversary, of my grandfather. So that's my view of the Mekong is just, this is food, and food, But then and when I returned in 1990s and, in the 90s, and then subsequently organizing this international exchange, I traveled back here with my student and then really have a real taste of the Mekong, a real taste of the Delta, a real, encounter with, real people. Of communities, of commune, of from xã, from wing, from district, from commune. Then, I have a new kind of information, experience, and appreciation, along with the grasping of culture and grasping of history.
I see. Yeah. And so I've been to Mekong Delta of a certain city, right? I've been to Cần Thơ, I've been to Cà Mau.
Yeah.
Is it Cà Mau? It's still in the Mekong Delta?
Yeah. It's the tip of the Delta.
Very bad as you can see.
Yeah.
But so my dad's actually from Vĩnh Long, right? It's also in the Mekong Delta.
Yeah.
But similar like you, I grew up in the city. I never been doing or like really living and experiencing the Mekong Delta. Whenever we go back, whenever families relative coming up, it's always food or it's always touristy stuff. But I never truly see how is the river, how is the culture there. So could you paint me the picture or tell me what is it like?
Let's kind of reimagining, the Indochina Peninsula.
Yes.
At that time, you will see kind of blurry, borders, right? And we were in the Red River Delta, forming our own kingdom, facing constantly threat from the north, right? And then, our small kingdom get bigger and larger, and then, of course, impossible to move north because of the antagonism or the rivalry between the two kingdoms. And in many years, for example, throughout history, we were being dominated, and so we have no choice but moving south. And then we reach the central part of Vietnam, and then slowly we move along this very narrow strip along the seashore. And then by the time we get down to the first part of the branch of the Mekong rivers, then we starting to slow down, because at that we're starting to encounter also existing cultures, existing communities who have been there, much longer than us. For example, in the south central Vietnam, we encounter the Champa people, the Cham people. Yes. As some association there was some conflict there, but overall, there was some historical agreement that we reached some sort of agreement with the king, and then we move on south, and then we reach to what we call now the Saigon, which
Yes.
is used to be called Pre Nokor because it was
Pre Nokor.
Cambodian, right?
Yeah.
Then we encounter that new group of people we call Khmer, and then interact with them. And at the same time, by the 18th century, we also found that there were also immigrants, coming from the Pearl River Delta in China that, coming by boat.
Oh.
Thereby, we call them Người
Ba
Tao,
Tao.
Người Tao. So they come over. And then, they explore, they work, and, the hardworking, and bringing all kind of experience from the Pearl River Delta, they certainly, have contributed to the expansion of the Mekong Delta, and many of them were pioneers, and they were, very collaborative with the Nguyen Kingdom. And so they say, hey, okay, we cannot go back to China. And here we have this whole, part of the land that we now are domesticating it, and then we've been growing rice, we've been doing, trade, so might as well, become part of you. And so the contribution of the Chinese in the Delta is tremendous,
Oh,
right?
wow. I
Secondly,
didn't know that.
we have, for example, the techniques of using, for example, water among the Khmer, during the time of the Angkor Empire, right? Now they call it Thủy Chân Lap, which is, Khmer Maritime, or they call it Khmer Krom.
Yes.
Then, the association again, we have some agreement, and we send one of our princess, Công chúa Ngọc Vàng,
Yes.
to marry a Khmer king, and then thereby she brings us, more land, right? So I think the acquisition of the land was somewhat, I think, done peacefully, unlike people say, that we have to use all kind of what you called it, insidious or stuff that we can try to acquire. But I think it's through association, it's through some kind of at least from my point of view, maybe historian might not agree with me that we use force, but I think it was peaceful, for four communities to coexist. You see, and to this day also, of course there were also differences, but I can see, for example, in the province of Sóc Trăng and the province of Travin, well, people can coexist, and I think that maybe for me, I think that's truly, an achievement, right? I don't see any kind of thing. And then, in fact, I think when the French came, well, there were many Chinese patriot. Of course, Chinese Vietnamese then, like Trương Định, and those people were joining the opposition, joining Phan Thanh Giảng, and of course, Gu Fang is also Chinese descendant,
Yes.
right? And he's from your province.
Oh, Vĩnh Long
Phan
too.
Thanh Giảng is from
Yeah.
Vĩnh Long, yeah. So therefore, I can see the Delta build, at least in terms of ethnic and communities-wise, is the association of four groups. Those who come from central Vietnam, like the Ngũ Quảng, Quảng Đức, Quảng Bình, Quảng Trị, Quảng Ngãi, Quảng Nam. So they come down and they bring their kind of experience, their kind of techniques, their kind of motivation, their kind of enthusiasm, and work well. And then after that, joining together with the people like Mạc Cửu, Trần Tháng Tài, Trương Ngạn Định, and all those come together. At the same time, also the Cham people from Châu Đốc, and the Khmer in place. They were always there, right? Ever since the 9th, the 10th century, they were there under the kingdom of Phunam, and then later on under Angkor Empire, and then those four groups joined together to form a multicultural Delta makeup composite of four people living together.
Okay.
So
And
that's
then-
the part that I think in terms of ethnic, in terms of historical, maybe during the last 300 years. Yeah.
And then right now, for the river culture right now, when you come back like 30 years ago, What was it like? What resonated with you so much that you
Well,
decide to
I guess
work closely with
by
it?
it's important for the Vietnamese frame of mind that you have to live with water, and since you interact with water, you live on water, by the water, and sometimes you fish underwater. Then you have to that particular culture is formed, and that's formed according to the weather condition, is formed according to the morphology of the region. At one point, if you compare the Amazon River, right, and you compare to the Mekong, those two of these international waterways in many ways have the most highly biodiversified ecological system.
Wow.
It's amazing. If the Amazon in some part of Manaus or some part of the Rio Negro, you would find 200, 400, or sometimes up to 800 species of fish than Vietnam is equivalent to.
Wow.
We have almost 1,000 type of fish. And for a stretch of, let's say, 200 kilometers, right, from the border between Cambodia and Vietnam, and then Da Nang, the estuary of Da Nang or Tân Dae or Cung Hau, you have a huge number of type of fish, surface water fish, middle level water fish, bottom feeders, it's amazing. And the old Vietnamese saying to say that, trên bờ, on the land we have rice, we have these, tropical fruit. In the water we have fish, and it was, Vietnamese always say, làm một, work only, one, but then take in 10, lấy 10. So that was, the richness of the Delta. In well-balanced kind of condition, we don't overuse, we don't overexploit, we don't, treat the land badly, or we don't have the action of human who control the water, who stop the water, who store the water, and who become a water hegemon, controlling like that. So now the Delta has changed drastically during the last 25, 30 years. I think it's the way that I can see it's just not going to be stopping anytime soon, because, the exploitation is ongoing. The type of human action onto the rivers continuous, right? And then also we don't have really a solid strategy just in order to mitigate, to slow down the exploitation, to keep, the respect of nature, to keep a balanced way of living with nature. And so right now we are paying a very high price.
So take me back to, like you came back 30 years ago and seeing Mekong Delta. And now I know that you visited Mekong Delta, like different province, like almost every single week.
Yeah.
Then can you tell me
I can give you
like an example of like something that drastically different between 30 years ago and right now?
One of the best expression of the water culture and văn hóa sông nước, you would see that we have, land markets, chợ ở trên đất, right? You can see that. But then we have chợ nổi.
Chợ nổi is like floating market
floating
on the river.
Markets, yeah, we have a lot of these floating markets. And 30 years ago, you have plenty. At any confluence, at any bend, at any crossing, you will find a floating market. And this market came very early, bringing out the best produce, from the various part of, the Delta. And then you kind of like congregate in some sort of a crossing between a canal and then the river, or a branch, of the river and another branch of the river. And all these, the floating market are the symbol of, this rich, special type of water culture. You have cái răng, phong điền, cái nước, cái bè, chợ nổi Trà Ôm. You have all kind, in I can say that, over, 20, 30 floating markets.
What happened to them
What
now?
happened now is just that's disappearing for two reasons. We have more bridges, right? We have more highways. So, of course, people would prefer to use those kind of facilities in order to get faster. But, we have moved somewhat on land. And at the same time, right now, the floating markets are quick disappearing. Right now, you only can have Kai Rang and then you have Kai Bea. Sometimes you get there early enough, you can find. But after that, after 10 o'clock, they all disappear. Because why? Because, the type of, activity was not being sustained. You just find the easiest way, to do things, and then you don't appreciate the kind of, boat that coming together, and you have Keibeo, the little pole, stopping up there, and you see the hanging of a fruit, you see the hanging of a vegetable, and you say, hey, this is we don't appreciate that. We becoming, somewhat attracted into going around with all these new things, and then what happened is just people say, hey, you don't use it, we don't sustain
There's
it.
no point to
There's
continue.
no point because in the old days when you transport, right, because most of the transportation was done on water. 70% of all transportation in the old days were done on water because number one, it's safer, it's cheaper. And then you can use, the water force of the tide, right? When the tide moving up and then you go up, you don't use energy. And then when the tide going down, you can use it. And so the kind of water skill that people have slowly disappear with not using it. And then now, in the old days, you use transportation for all the potteries. Potteries, when you put with straw on the boat, is less breakable. Whereas if you go onto big, container truck, you make a bump and then the pottery will go clang. And in the Delta, we use with a lot of pottery, lu, jiao, hap, all of that. Now, you put them onto some sort of styrofoam stuff and
see.
you put it on the thing, you save it,
Yeah.
but it's cheaper. So therefore, you don't use boat for this kind of a breakable or, fragile kind of thing.
I see.
Yeah.
And
then what happened too is just, the water used to be cleaner. You have living on those boats. You can both become flexible. You can travel, of course. You go from places to places. You have certain kind of freedom, right? And then now, the water are, not that good anymore, right? There's sometimes some branches or some canal would have enough water that you can navigate, but it now with the change in climate, some places is inaccessible. You cannot use the waterways, or you cannot use a certain canal because there's not enough water. So slowly, water culture is under threat.
I see. And so one of the reason why I wanted to do this episode is because right now in Vietnam, the central Vietnam is experiencing a lot of flood and a lot of storm.
Yeah.
And this year, well, I feel like for the past 3 or 5 years, it's always been the biggest storm ever, like in history. And every single year is becoming bigger. And this year, like we have around 10 storms in 1 month, in a span of 1 month. Like just you continuously see more storm coming in, and the next storm is stronger than the others. And I personally really believe that because climate change, and also there's a lot of theories is because of the resources that we've been using, right? For hydroelectricity.
Right.
So many people, so many like small hydroelectricity that they have a dam and they holding the water in there,
Right.
and then like during this time they just open the gate, right?
Yeah.
And then that caused a flood that kill and just destroy everything. What would be those kind of consequences for Mekong Delta if we continue to do all the things that we're doing right now?
It was right after the Green Revolution. In the 1960s, for example, people like Paul Ehrlich and people who study world population came out with this warning. He said, "Oh wow, look at this. The Earth is bursting by the seam because we produce so much children after the war, sort of like a baby boom.
Baby boom
and then
area.
we pump out, and I am one of the baby boomer. Right now, I was born right after the Second World War, and so he warned us that how with the limited resources that we have on Earth, because this is the only planet that we have to use whatever the planet give us. There's no way, because at that time, even though we landed on the moon, but there's nothing on the moon that you can use as edible, right? So he warned us about that, and then come about this kind of thing. Hey, we should think of a solution for this, and then here come all of those research in biology and all of those fantastic researchers who say, hey, we found the answer. What if we use the kind of water we're going to irrigate, we're going to turn arid region, the desert, into very arable a patch of land. We can bring in the water, we can bring in all kind of chemicals. We're going to try to make the fertile soil really fertile again. And so here come all these big corporation, Dow Chemical, Johnson and Johnson, and all those people, and they come out with the best kind of species, the kind of what you call it, grain, for crops, and then they come with the fertilizer for that kind of crop. They come with the pesticide for that kind of crop, and then in many regions of the world, we certainly see a surge of what you call it, rice and then cereals and everything. So we were taken by that kind of onslaught of green revolution, and we're starting to build dams, because dam, irrigation is dam irrigation, and dam is energy, dam is irrigation, and dam is food. So the whole world starting to build a whole bunch of dams.
I see.
And currently, if you can think of, China has 85,000 dams.
Damn, that's a lot.
Yeah. United States, we started first. We have over 50. There's no river in the world right now that's not big. It's not having a cement block on it.
Yeah, and then
Very rarely.
and for Mekong Delta,
Yeah.
because it's run across China and then Laos and Cambodia,
Yeah.
Thailand too, right?
Yeah.
and then like two. So China is the beginning of the river, and then Vietnam is like the bottom, like the end of the river,
the end
right?
of the river,
And then every single piece of Mekong Delta, from like even like not in China only, but then in other country, everybody has their own dams.
Yeah.
So eventually, because everybody's blocking the water, not a lot of things come back to the end of the water anymore, like the end of the body river anymore. Before, all the nutritions is actually at the end of the river, because that's the end of the flow, and then all the nutrition. That's why the Mekong Delta in Vietnam is really prosperous, and it has created a big community and big resourceful, and like basically all of food grow there, right?
Yeah.
But now, because all the dams has been created in multiple countries, and I'm not sure it's in Vietnam. Do they do it as well?
Well, we have dams too. We
Yes,
have
but it's in
Yali
on
Dam.
Mekong
We have
Delta?
Se San. We have on the Mekong
Yes.
River.
So basically,
we have
all
whole
that we
bunch,
also have dams too. So basically, we're blocking the water from flowing, and that is creating a problem. Now, the one that we're seeing right now is that when all the dams start opening their gate, we see flood.
Right.
In central Vietnam, this year is the biggest flood that they've ever seen for the past ever. Like 40 years, 50 years, I don't know.
Yeah.
And in Mekong Delta, then we see drought.
Drought.
Yeah, because there's not enough
salinization,
water coming down.
Yeah.
And all this will eventually, this is the problem that we visually see right now. But what would happen if this continues in another 50 years?
Oh, well, there might not be a delta anymore.
Last time we discussed about this, you mentioned that there are threat between, when the river is disappearing,
Right.
meaning people are migrating apart from the river.
Right.
That means there will be more issue arise, not just within the river, right? You would think, I don't live anywhere near a river. I'm living in the city. Why does this matter to me? Then think about this. Those people who live nearby the river will no longer can feed their family. And because of that, they will start going and migrating in other area
Right.
within the city. Or if they go into a city, imagine overpopulations. Right now in Ho Chi Minh City, we have 11 million people, and they are planning to have another city next door, which is gonna be like 20. The predictions population is gonna be 20 or 30 million people. Imagine that many people in the same area.
Right.
How much problem will there be? And then what if they don't have jobs? What if they can't find jobs? That means that more criminal or more and then more poverty, because they cannot sustain or they cannot help feed themselves. And then there will be more problem like human trafficking.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's even further out where people who can't feed themselves, they have to sell themselves.
Yeah.
And that's, like we always say, how far will you go for the family? How far you go to survive? That's how far people could go. And if we not caring about this, that is all the consequence going to affect it on our society.
Yeah.
And and it's really, it feel like it's a very urgent problem.
Large river, and I can tell you, for example, Quang Tu, District 4, for example, right, is an island. It's surrounded by water. Now, if you keep on building these high condos along the Nguyen Tất Thành Street, right, and you're gonna be blocking the water from flowing down to the river, because along the waterway, along the water edge, you will build a whole bunch of high rises. And by the time you build the foundation, you dig the foundation, you stick inside in the underground a big piece of cement. And when you stick that big piece of cement, it's going to stop the water from the rain to come out. And so if Quận 7, Quận 4, Quận 2, it's surrounded by these kind of high rises from Bến Vân Đồn, and then you go up there, you see Kinh Tế, and then you turn around and you see the other, part of Kinh Tàu Hủ. And if the Saigon River is right there too, so you build that kind of like a dike system. Not really a dike, but above that it's like a high rises, big condo facing the river, and you build just like a little basin. Same thing with Phu Quoc. Phu Quoc, all around Phu Quoc has never had this kind of flood. But now because of this developer, they built surrounding the seashore. They built all these condos and resort and high rises. So they put cement, all around the seashore. So it's become like a basin. So so this is what modernization is important for Vietnam to catch up. But this modernization is without good, sound development. You see, we don't have no plan. We just let these guys, speculating on the land, and then they pay so high, so much on the land. So therefore, when they want to recoup whatever they invest, they build these high rises, and in so small piece. And then in order to build high rises tall enough, you have to have good foundation. And when you have foundation for 20 or 30 story, you dig deep into the ground, and then you put cement into it. And when you put cement into it, it's become a block. It's stopped the water from flowing out. So right now I can see why Nguyễn Hữu Cảnh is always flooded. Because it could not go to Thi Nga canal. It could not go to the river of Saigon.
Some of the main street got flooded.
Yeah.
And a lot of the people blame it on the
Tukung, on the tide, on the something
like
like that.
the
Yeah.
draining system.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no,
a lot of people
no,
are
no.
blaming on that, right? But right now, what I'm getting from you is that it's not just that. It's because of the development. It's because we blocking the water underground.
We blocking water.
And that's why it's created this problem.
Not only that, but then underneath, in the what we live right above ground, underneath we have aquifers.
Yeah.
We have a lot of aquifers in there, and we suck them up. We just use whatever we build. We dig wells, left and right. We dig wells left and right. We sucked up all that river, all that's water, right? And then when you take that, it's gonna be founding down, subsidence. So when one, when you have all kind of water here, it's hold up, right? And when you suck it all out, it's gonna subside. It's gonna go down, and when it's gonna go down, the water gonna come right there. So that's what happened with Nguyễn Hữu Cảnh.
Wow.
So those people are irresponsible, for that little whatever money they gain, but they have no responsibility. They have no respect for the population. It is only for the rich. And the poor are gonna get the water. The rich can build, can lift the houses with a higher piece of cement, right?
Yes.
But the poor, just and so when you bring your house up with cement, the water from there gonna come to the poor, to the poorer section.
Yeah. And so I understand that because economical reasons, there's been a lot of developments. There's been a lot of overuse of resources everywhere, right?
Overuse. I think this maybe is total exploitation with irresponsible behavior.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So basically, but that's the thing about I think it's Vietnam or like anywhere that people don't really take account on nature or natural resource. We always talk about, hey, let's love our environment. Hey, let's be good to the environment. But we don't really see the real effect.
We don't really,
Yeah, we just see like, oh, well, in 10 years or in 20 years, or if in the lifetimes of a person, 50 years. But we never account like what happened in our actions today gonna affect 100 years from now.
Yeah.
So for you, for my questions then, for those who really want to start learning and really want to start to actually be responsible, then how do we help or how do we contribute?
Well, I have thought about that, in many cafe sessions with either by myself or sometimes I interact with some of my former students, and we look at it, I can see, a lot of challenges, and the challenges would need a good, sound education system to cope with that. And if you don't insert, if you don't build, if you don't have a lesson plan that include all of these kind of matter of a slow movement between, sustainability concept, and then the way to get to sustainability concept and the responsibility of people who live in such a, situation, then, I don't think 5.0 and 4.0 would do any good.
Yeah. So it's a very interesting take. I want to emphasize right there is that, so sustainability development is something that is now a new buzzword, right? A lot of people been learning and trying to understand what it's like because we are seeing the consequence of overexploiting our nature irresponsible. But to really, really eradicate or mitigate this problem, we are not just taking the actions for this generations because I believe you would agree with this, is that this generations wouldn't able to fix all the problems.
No.
It has to come from the next generations, the future generations, where they are learned and they are educated about sustainability even when they're young. Like even like from the beginning of education or in the first grade, they need to learn and understand how to recycle, how to recycle, how to
Have
what
to,
does the love of natures mean?
Right.
What are the benefit of natures and how do we sustain them? How do we coexisting with them without just shutting out everything and just living our own little city?
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I certainly agree with you on the issue of of an educational planning and sound planning, but at the same time also I don't like the idea of throw everything and put everything into the hands of the future generation. I think we have to start right now. The older
Yes.
generation, like myself, we have to be responsible. We have to set example. If we just say blame it, or we just say, hey, it is the current situation. So what we're going to do about that? We just let the future generation to come up with the idea, with the solution.
Yeah.
That's irresponsible. I've heard people who told me this kind of idea, and it's make me somewhat angry, because they say, hey, if for example, Huang Sa or Chung Sa, we're gonna get it back later on. No,
Wow.
you gotta fight right now. You gotta do something right now, and just not say, hey, it's the responsibility of the future generation, because we have to take action right now. We have to change our behavior. We have to set example. We have to go out and we say, hey, if we see someone who throw trash in the street, we say, don't do that. Or people dump some sort of a big trash can into the river, we say, don't do that. We have to say that right now, and not say, I'm going to go home and tell my son to go out and tell him, him to do that. You cannot do that.
Yes.
And then I say that, that the kind of skirting or avoiding the responsibility, it's not good. And I think the mentality of the Vietnamese always attached to this mặc kệ nó, the heck with it, right?
Yeah.
That's, I think, is wrong. I think it's just a
Because,
bunch of and say, hey, that's not right. So why do you mặc kệ? Because it's affect you, it's affect the next generation, it's affect the future generation as well. So you have to be active right now, and don't just push it to someone else or kick the ball away to someone else. No. And I know that the government has all the effort toward that, but I think they need to have a joint partnership, a solid partnership, with people who come from all walks of life, who come in together and who participate. And if you don't, and if the law and if anything that might prevent them from large crowd gathering or whatever, in terms of security and all that stuff, you have to overcome that kind of thing and encourage people to become active, to become involved, and to become responsible, right? Because here, any kind of association, any kind of gathering, any kind of anything, instill the sense of fear from the government to say that when you get together too crowded, you might create problem. But it is important to teach people or to share with people knowledge, information, and the reality. And the only way, whether you can use it online, great. But if you can do it face to face, because face to face is still, I think, is more efficient than your Zoom or your FaceTime or whatever. When you face to somebody, you see the person, you convince the person, and then when you do Zoom or when you do whatever you can do, the person can just turn you on and then go to the kitchen and,
Yes.
and have an ice cream, and the heck with you. So I think we need to have a solid plan. And that would be an involvement of sharing responsibility, and just don't say that you don't have to worry. You sit back there. The government will do it for you. No way. This kind of society have shifted totally from what you can call that. Let the leaders worry about everything, and then no, I don't think that's the kind of a
so that's not the right
responsible
way.
Yeah.
That's not the right way to just let other people take the responsibility for things that you could also take action and
That's
affect.
right, because you are a member of the society. You are living there. You do it for yourself. You're right there, and then you say, hey, there's someone else coming all the way from District 7 to come in and to clean up your place. No, yeah. And in the Navarro River in Northern Cal, for example, Northern California, in the springtime, you see these orchids overhang on both sides of the stream, and it's just truly beautiful, And I see, I could imagine that with the rivers of Vietnam, for example, but then when I got back here, it's a total different spectacle, right? Total
Yes.
different scene, and you see, house on still, you see floating market. You see people who live on the river. You see life on the river. Sometimes people who live on the boat for 3, 4 generations, and then that's their life. And at one point, I dream. I say it's so damn romantic. If I will have my girlfriend with me floating down the river, But then I find out that it's not that.
That
The
romantic?
way, the exotic or the kind of romantic that I
Yeah.
see, because I watch closely on the boat. They have 3 big lu, big jar,
Yeah.
and one would for this water, one for this kind of washing water, and one for this kind of cooking water, and they have to make sure that they have enough water, right? They have to check also when the movement of the water go up, when the movement of the water go down, when they have to check also to see whether that next storm would be coming from where, in order for them to find shelter, and they have to look for also location where they can go buy produce, even though they can buy on floating market, right? So all of that kind of romanticism is kind of disappear.
Still
At the same
sounds
time,
kind of romantic to me.
yeah, and at the same time, I still wanting to be with them, and sometimes I sat by the landing and I talked to this couple, right? And they have 2 dogs on the
They have
on the
2
boat.
dogs on the
Yeah,
boat?
right. And this I call them river dogs, and I have these photos of them, and they talk about it's sort of like a small unit of human unit that have 2 generation, husband and wife, the 2 kids and then the 2 dogs, and they sell produce. They pick up house plant from Sadek, and then they travel down and then they sell them in this market, and then they pick up produce, either cereals or any kind of thing, and they bring upstream, and all of that. I think it's not easy, it's not romantic, and then it's hard working, and generations like that. Can you imagine you will only live within this kind of space of something like 7 or 8 square meters, and it's family, and then sometimes you procreate, you make babies in there, and then you live, and then you go on land to give birth, and then they come back on there, and it's really tough. And yet, we persist over 300 years, maybe 260 years, but they live like that, and that's the sustainability given to these people, because they sustain that. And now we don't pay attention. We say, hey, what happened is their own fate. What happened if they lose all of that? They have to move on land, and then they have to struggle again. So I think if we lose that culture, it will be a big loss. It will be, the Delta will be no longer Delta. And that's the feature. How do we sustain that? I think is a big question, and I think it needs a lot of researchers, from cross-disciplinary, from a whole bunch of discipline to come together, and then to find maybe a kind of a roadmap that we can go one at a time, and we can sustain it. Want to find how does it, for example, to sustain these kind of activities. For example, if they don't do transportation, then they move over to tourism, and how the tourism can use them. You have to think about that too, right?
Yeah.
So these are one of them, and I guess for me it's a new thing that I learned along these many years when I come back here, and I still feel attached to that, and I still feel involved in a way that I might never find the solution, maybe until the end of my life, for example, right? But at least I think an attempt to see the delta, the way I would perceive it to be, for example, then it's just like a little effort, and I hope that it will be serving some sort of a bigger effort, and that bigger effort would carry the result that I wish for.
Yeah, absolutely beautiful. And thank you for coming today and sharing all of that stories and insight about Mekong Delta. It's also something that's like it's really close. It's very common to know about Mekong Delta, but to really see the picture and really see the culture or really see the effects that we having on the river or the river having on us, then I really, really appreciate to learn all that today. Thank you for sharing. And I hope the audience is also enjoying this and also, get those message like eager to start learning or start knowing more about Mekong Delta or knowing more about sustainability and how to really develop something for the future generations. And so for those who want to reach out to you or to find more about your work, then how do they find you?
Oh, I currently have a page on Facebook. It's called Mekong Spirit, and I update it as I go along. With information from upstream. Upstream project construction, some type of research, some information about the effect of other kind of activities pertaining to the river, and I'm building up a new blog right now because I have a friend. She, advised me to become more active in making this information available, to all of you, and I hope by understand the river, you would love the river. And of course, I think, this is I want to say a thank you sentence, long enough for all the audience that you have, put up to me for this last hour or so. I thank you, the hosts, also for allowing me to, express, whatever I think of the current situation of rivers and particularly in the Delta. And I also would hope that, would relink with you at some point in the future when, there was new information and there's new activities that I think it's important for you to, to get it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also know that you also have like a lot of documentary footage about the Mekong Delta. And the last time I saw it, it was really, really beautiful. So hopefully we may able to share a little bit of those for the audience as well.
Right. I mean, later on, I will be making those available.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And so thank you guys for tuning in for the episodes. I hope you enjoy this episode, and make sure to reach out to Tae-you, or you let us know what you think about the episode on our social media handles, Vietnam Rising. And thank you. See you guys in the next episode. Bye bye.
Okay, bye bye.